Imagine this, you're trying to eat healthier. Well, maybe you don't have to imagine it. You're trying to avoid sugary snacks, but on a hectic day, after skipping a meal, you find yourself craving cookies, and despite your best intentions, you cave into them. This lapse isn't a lack of willpower, but rather a prime example of attentional bias. Attentional bias is a fascinating cognitive phenomenon that defines how we focus on certain stimuli while ignoring others. It's something we experience daily, often without realizing it. Even when you are consciously trying to eat healthy, when you're hungry, your mind is automatically drawn to what will satisfy you quickly, usually foods high in sugar or fat. The stronger the need, the harder it becomes to divert your attention to healthier options. You might logically know what you should do, but attentional bias shifts your focus to immediate rewards, sabotaging long-term goals. This kind of bias is everywhere, not just in our dietary struggles. It's a byproduct of how our brains are wired. Human attention is limited. We don't have the bandwidth to focus on everything simultaneously, so our minds take shortcuts, often favoring things that seem urgent or emotionally charged. This might have been beneficial for our ancestors, who needed to focus on food and threats for survival, but in modern life, it can work against us. For example, we tend to pay more attention to emotionally salient details, like bad news, or our favorite treats, rather than other important things happening around us. The bias doesn't stop there. It extends into our professional decision-making. Let's consider a classic case. Imagine you're a police officer. Studies have shown that under stress, such as during an emergency response, police officers are more likely to perceive a suspect as a threat, influenced by their anxiety. This stress-induced attentional bias causes a hyper-focus on the suspect's actions, while other, possibly mitigating factors, fade into the background. This means that even when a suspect is just in the wrong place at the wrong time, his presence can unjustly trigger a heightened sense of suspicion from law enforcement. Attentional bias also poses challenges for people with addictive disorders. Imagine trying to quit smoking. You're at a cafe where you'd usually have a cigarette with your coffee. Now that you've quit, it's nearly impossible not to notice people around you lighting up, or the subtle smell of tobacco in the air. Your brain, conditioned to associate smoking with pleasure, becomes hyper-attuned to these stimuli. This fixation makes it harder to resist the urge to smoke, and highlights why quitting requires not just willpower, but a conscious effort to avoid triggers. But why do we have these biases? It comes down to how our brains developed. Attentional biases once kept us alive. Focusing on food or potential threats helped our ancestors navigate dangerous environments. Food biases, for example, are so deeply ingrained that when we're hungry, our brains naturally zoom in on anything edible. This once served us well in times of scarcity. But today, with an abundance of high-calorie foods, it's easy to see how this bias just leads to overeating. The same is true for threats. Being overly vigilant in the wild might have saved lives, but in today's less perilous world, this vigilance can manifest as anxiety disorders. Another major factor behind attentional bias is how we process information. Our brains are packed with schemas, mental frameworks that help us organize knowledge. Think of them as mental filing cabinets, where we store everything we know about people, places, and events. These schemas allow us to process information quickly, but they also prime us to focus on certain details while ignoring others. For example, if you've had negative experiences at work, you might start to view all new projects through a negative lens, over-focusing on potential pitfalls and missing the possible rewards. People with depression often experience this bias to a heightened degree, fixating on the negatives while filtering out the positives, further reinforcing their low mood. Attentional bias also creeps into our decision-making in more subtle ways. Imagine you're a company executive tasked with improving employee productivity. If you focus solely on one metric, like hours worked, you might ignore other important factors like employee morale or creative output. This tunnel vision is a direct result of attentional bias. Focusing too narrowly on specific metrics can lead to skewed perceptions and poor decisions. Alternatively, a bias toward emotional factors might cause you to favor solutions that feel right emotionally, even if they're not supported by data. So, how can we avoid attentional bias? Complete avoidance might be impossible, given how deeply embedded it is in our cognitive functioning, but we can manage it. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing when you're fixating on a single detail at the expense of others is crucial. It helps to take a step back and reassess the bigger picture. For example, if you find yourself obsessing over how a new project might fail, try to shift your focus to the potential rewards as well. Reframing a situation to consider multiple perspectives can help mitigate the bias. In clinical settings, cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT often targets attentional biases, helping individuals retrain their focus. For example, a therapist might help a client recognize that they're fixating on negative thoughts and guide them toward considering more positive or neutral alternatives. Similarly, mindfulness exercises have been shown to reduce certain types of attentional bias. In one study, experienced meditators displayed less bias toward negative emotional stimuli compared to non-meditators, showing that with time and practice, it's possible to cultivate a more balanced attentional focus. Mindfulness meditation, which has gained popularity as a tool for reducing stress and increasing productivity, offers a way to practice being present and aware of where your attention is going. Studies show that even short-term mindfulness practices can reduce attentional biases. Regular meditators tend to focus less on negative stimuli and more on positive or neutral stimuli, suggesting that mindfulness can help recalibrate our attentional filters. This shift can be incredibly helpful in everyday life, allowing us to focus on what truly matters rather than getting caught up in distractions. Interestingly, attentional bias also contributes to our political beliefs. A study showed that we tend to focus more on content that aligns with our existing views. Our tunnel vision means we tend to filter out information that doesn't match our worldview. In this sense, attentional bias shapes how we interpret political events, news, and even conversations with others, creating a recursive feedback loop that steadily reinforces the ideologies we already hold dear. This is further intensified by algorithm-driven social media apps that provide us not with a diverse range of opinions, but a stream of content that is just more of the same of what we have already consumed. In sum, attentional bias is a deeply ingrained part of how our brains process information. While it helped our ancestors survive by focusing on food and threats, today it can hinder our ability to make balanced decisions, whether we're trying to avoid sugary snacks, quit smoking, or make informed political choices. However, with mindfulness, feedback, and an awareness of this bias, we can start to manage it better and make more well-rounded decisions. By broadening our focus and being mindful of where our attention drifts, we can avoid the pitfalls of attentional bias and navigate life with greater clarity. You can be mindful now by not forgetting to like, share, and subscribe.